Hello and welcome back to a new Beaver Hunter scale models video. More precisely, this is the beginning of a series of videos where I want to show you how I painted this young miniatures bust with oil paints. First, let's check the parts, and these bazooka pieces should make my life even harder later. Some good reference pictures for the painting and assembly are always welcome. I started to deburr the parts and remove casting pieces. At the back of the head was a slight casting seam which I removed, otherwise the head was very cleanly casted. Then I grabbed the helmet, where casting had to be removed in the inner part. I tested the fit several times. With my Dremel and a round grinding attachment, I sanded the inner part to fit. Resin dust is very toxic, so definitely wear respiratory protection when grinding or sanding resin. At the body there was only a casting branch at the lower area, which I also removed with a Dremel. Smoothing the edge with a knife. To emphasize the drizzles under pockets or the tornister, I carefully scraped out the crevices a little deeper with my knife. Also, belts or overlying things can be emphasized this way. The right of the patch emphasized and left unedited. In the case of the bazooka, excess cast residues were also removed and crevices were emphasized. Again, testing the fit. This part caused me great concern in advance, as it was very unclean and a lot of material had to be removed. I then opened the recesses with my Dremel and tried to work as accurate as possible, which I did not succeed 100%. I just hope that with some paint the part does not stand out too negative. At the bazooka belt, a small malheur happened to me when I wanted to clean the space between this metal eyelet. So I had to grab my super glue and get the part back into shape. To smooth out the areas that I have worked with my hobby knife, I took an obliquely cut cocktail skewer, and this smoothed the resin and emphasized the edges even more. With steel wool I then had all the grinding areas and places that were somehow worked on finally sanded. The last parts and the belt were glued on. What really helped me a lot with this and my first bust projects were the guides from Small Soldier. He's a true artist, and if you are interested in bust painting, figures or more, take a look at his channel. Highly recommended. To attach the belt, I had to drill out the loop with a small drill and open it backwards. And then close it again with super glue. With warmth, I wanted to shape the stiff strap a bit and give it a natural slope. Whoops, that was too much. Looks like the belt is a bit shorter at this particular piece. I removed excess glue with the bonder. For better handling while painting, I attached all parts with wire or toothpicks on corks. To close the gaps between the parts and give extra hold, I added some green stuff. If you keep your fingers and tools moist, it is easier to work with and it does not stick too much. With a damp toothpick, it can be placed, shaped and smoothed very easily. For the base, I wanted to create something unique, and so I designed and printed this one with my PLA printer, just like the 101st Airborne patch. For what I intend to do with it, the unsightly surface is no problem. I will probably make an own episode for the base. After I determined the center, I drilled a hole for the bust and tested the look and the fit. In addition to glue, I used green stuff to fix the stainless steel rod. Then it was time to clean the parts. In order for the paint to adhere well later, the dust from processing and the grease of the fingers must be washed off with soapy water and a toothbrush. And blowing it dry with my airbrush. Time to mount the parts to the handling aids. For the primer, I used lacquer thinner with Mr. Surfacer 1200 for the first time. These were applied with my airbrush. Small spoiler, for the first time ever I had problems later that the paint came off very easily and did not adhere well. I didn't had this problem at any of my earlier projects with usual acrylic primer before. So I am not sure if I will use the stuff again or if I did something wrong. Actually a pity, because it was really nice to spray and work with, but despite the smell. I don't know why, but after I applied the first layer of primer, I noticed some unsightly areas and casting burrs, which I hadn't noticed before, although I looked very closely. So I grabbed my tools and steel wool again and smoothed these areas out. And since I was close to priming again, I stained the steel bar with solid track to make an attempt to adhere the paint better to the smooth surface. And after a second round of priming, it was good to go. Then I started with pre-shading. First I sprayed from below with black paint to darken the shadow areas. The spray angle is very flat here, so that folds and edges only get some paint and sprayed from below. I don't think it's a bad thing if you work a bit inaccurately here or overdo it a bit, because the next step with the light paint corrects these areas. At the bazooka I also tried to create darker and brighter areas. Since the face is the most delicate part, I like to do it last, so I get some practice again until I reach this point. And then as a counterpart, the bright areas. For this I took deck tan because white was a bit too bright for me. Here you logically spray from above, again with a flat angle, and try to hit only those places that get light from above or where the light source may come from. Again the face as the last part to practice on the previous parts and see how the paint behaves. So everything was ready for pre-coloring. I chose matching acrylic paints to the oil paints I want to use later. With them I made a darker and a lighter version, just like with the pre-shading, and sprayed them from below or above. I mixed a suitable green tone for me, which I darkened with dark grey and burnt umber. This was then diluted with lacquer thinner and sprayed onto the torso. Again the darker version from below in a flat angle. I also found it not a bad thing to overdo it a bit here. Then I lightened the mixture with Iraqi sand and some deck tan and sprayed it from above. For the helmet I used US dark green and again darkened it to spray it from below, and brightened with Iraqi sand to spray from above. The bazooka got its first shades of green with the rest of the highlight paint of the torso. And with leather brown I primed the wooden handle. For more surface variation, I sprayed on some US dark green. And with this pure US dark green, I sprayed the middle part of the helmet to get a smoother color transition. I mixed the shadow paint for the face from cavalry brown, burnt umber, Prussian blue and yellow ochre. This was sprayed again from below in a flat angle. What else? With cavalry brown, yellow ochre and white, I mixed the highlight paint. And guess what? It was sprayed from above. Here I compared the head with the reference pictures to see where I stood, and then reworked the areas I thought could use some more highlights. Not great, not terrible. So that was it for now with the airbrush part, and I could finally grab a brush to paint details like the patch. I really love to paint details like this, no matter in 1/10 or 1/35 scale, especially when they are as beautiful sculpted as in this case. Only the Airborne lettering was not quite so perfectly sculpted. Just beautiful. At my first bust I painted the eyes relatively late, when I was already quite far in the painting progress with oil paints at the face. But since they helped me enormously to see where I stand, and they directly gave a more human impression to the piece, I decided this time to paint the eyes before I start with the oil paints. Here I am using dark brown for the underside of the upper lips and the underlayer of the pupils. Another benefit from painting the eyes now is that the risk is lower that I ruin the face when I make a mistake later in the painting stage. I then used blue to paint the rainbow skin of the eye, but I made sure that the outer ring of the dark brown paint remained to be seen. With black I painted the pupils. And indicated some light reflections in the eyes with white. Note that eyes are not really round and should be adapted to the shape of the eyelids. With a light pink tone I painted the lower lids to indicate a fleshy lid. The effect will be toned down a bit when painting with oil paints later. And after a sealing layer of matte varnish, we are done for today. Thank you very much for your attention and watching my video. I'm looking forward to your feedback and constructive criticism, and I would be very happy if you consider subscribing if you like what you saw. The next episode will be about painting the face with oil paints, so stay tuned for the next part. Thank you and stay safe.